a commitment to show an unfiltered view of the before, during, and after of key events live as it happens, to defend the First Amendment using our rights of a free press, and to amplify the voices of underrepresented individuals including Black, Indigenous, persons of color, and the LGBTQIA+ community. Our team is committed to seeking equality for all and holding those in power accountable. The easiest way to support Malcontent News is to bookmark our website at malcontentnews.com, like and follow us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, and follow us on Twitter, Twitch, Instagram, and in the Google News app. To provide financial support, you can become a patron, make a one-time donation through Venmo, or link your Twitch account to your Amazon Prime account and use your free subscription to subscribe to Malcontent News. Thank you for supporting independent journalism and for being a malcontent. Good afternoon, Malcontents. I'm David the Malcontent, and welcome to a special edition of Behind the Poll. We're with Nate Gowdy, photographer out of Seattle, who is probably most famous for his cover photograph that was featured on Time magazine. Nate was in Washington, D.C. during the insurrection that occurred on January 6th. Nate, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, happy to be here, David.
Nate, you provided us with 34 different images on the events. We're going to talk about a few of those a little bit further in. What I wanted to talk to you first about was, why did you decide to go to Washington, D.C.?
David, I went to Washington, D.C. Because I could, and more importantly, because I've been working on a long-term project documenting presidential politics and protest in the age of Trump. And I've covered more than 300 events across 23 states. And this is the conclusion, the final narrative for my book. And the inauguration will be it. And I'm sure, you know, everything that's happening will continue, but that'll have to be a new chapter for me.
You actually did not go into the Capitol, but you were on the Capitol grounds as the situation turned into a full-scale insurrection.
Yeah. I was on the side of the inaugural stage. I believe most of the demonstrators who breached the inside of the Capitol came in through the front. And because our reception was so bad, or my reception, everyone's reception, I wasn't monitoring the news, and it was literally anarchy out there.
Is there a story that jumps out in your mind on something that your camera didn't catch, but that's something your eyes and mind caught? And what would that story be?
So I have tunnel vision on the stills, but I do wish at times I would have turned my phone camera on. Parts that stick out are when the mob found out a woman was tragically shot and killed inside the Capitol. The whole crowd started chanting, "I can't breathe." That struck me. They like to take a lot of leftist slogans and acronyms, and they like to repurpose them and in a way to antagonize their opposition. You know, other things you can't see in the pictures is these people were organized. They had step ladders, they had huge banners, they were ready to unfurl. They knew exactly what they were doing. There was a contingent of Proud Boys militiamen I caught walking toward the Capitol in the AM when the National Mall was empty. It was barren because all the day's demonstrators were at Trump at his morning address between the Washington Monument and the White House, and I saw them. I came across them on my way there, marching in the opposite direction. When the mob breached barrier after barrier toward the inaugural stage, well, there would have had to have been another contingent of Proud Boys around the front. And so they were already divided up. And so basically they marched for a couple, they marched toward the Capitol on the Mall to a crowd of no one, literally almost no one, chanting F-word Antifa. And there may have been another photographer at some point, another photographer too, but at first I was the only photographer I knew of. And they were threatening me. And when I said I was, media for Rolling Stone, they made fun of me and still assumed that, plenty of them seemed to assume I was Antifa. And so I once I realized the danger, because I photographed them before, and at first I was kind of like right in the middle of their crowd, but they were getting really hostile and they're easily triggered. And so I started keeping my distance a little more. And so they marched toward the Capitol, they kneeled and prayed, and then they broke for lunch. we had ended up near a bunch of food trucks, and so it was lunchtime, and so everyone went and got hot dogs and tacos or whatever, and then they reconvened. They merged with the general populace, and then the insurrection, the attack, it happened so fast. It took a little bit for it to dawn on me what was happening.
So you talked about the breaking for lunch and going to like some food trucks that were set up there. Is that some of the pictures that you have? Because I know in some of the pictures you sent me, there's at least one picture of some people at a hot dog cart.
Yeah, it's just kind of it's just funny. Everyone needs to eat, and I'm sure glad we did, because all I'd had was a granola bar, so I grabbed a hot dog too, and because it was a day where there were no porta potties around and at the insurrection. And so everyone there had to go all day without using the facilities. And so you were afraid to drink, but at least I got a little food in me. And
let's talk about a couple of the photos that you had said.
Yeah. So normally the Proud Boys they have their trademark black polos with white trim. There is not one of those to be seen on January 6th. And the Proud Boys had telegraphed their intentions ahead of time, saying they had planned to be incognito, even wearing black and trying to mimic the look of Black Bloc. I can see why they maybe did that, because they didn't want to be labeled as Proud Boys, perhaps, with what they were intending to do. But they did have shirts that said Enrique Tarrio did nothing wrong. At one point I asked the leader, which was Rufio, I'm sure you've encountered him here in Seattle. I think he's one of the local Proud Boys from Vancouver, Washington, or wherever he's from. He was leading them in Enrique's absence, and I asked him, is there a quote? I took your photo. Is there something you want to say, for words to put with the photo, pair with the photo? And he said all he wanted to say was "back the yellow."
On the subject of back the yellow, we've seen a number of videos that have come out of the insurrection in the Capitol, where Capitol Police were being taunted, were being told that Republicans hate you, that you should just quit your jobs. We don't back the blue anymore because who do you serve? Did you see any of that? And then what was the expression, the body language? I mean, how did the police react to all of this?
Sure, great question. So they were almost pleading in the front. They were almost pleading with police, letting them know, trying to let them know that they're on the same side. And, like, hey, we don't want to hurt you. We don't want to fight you. I'm paraphrasing, but that was the gist. And basically they were like, hey, we don't want, don't make us do this. We don't want to have to do this. And so, and meanwhile, and I didn't capture it in a single photo, but, there are Blue Lives Matter. They're waving Blue Lives Matter flags. Meanwhile, they're attacking, they're pepper spraying, they're terrorizing the police forces who, frankly, had their kid gloves on. From what I witnessed, they were doing their best to repeatedly de-escalate. And I've never seen that level in the last year of protests. I've never seen that level of restraint from, Seattle PD.
I saw one video clip where Capitol Police officers dressed in full riot gear are evacuating out of the Capitol. They're walking through a crowd. They're being completely taunted. One officer, they all look very grim-faced and defeated. And one officer, when the insults are getting hurled, turns and it's like, I've seen that turn, right? And it's like, oh, here we go. And the other officers are just pushing them, because the reality is they were so deep in a mob that it would have not gone well, which is probably the tactical reason. It was just like, buddy, keep moving.
They were overwhelmed. They needed backup, and and I guess that comes from on high, and Trump obviously didn't want to call in backup, and because they were drastically overwhelmed, and it's just really something seeing photos from BLM protests this summer outside the Capitol compared to the 6th. It's quite a contrast. They were not only outmanned, but they just weren't prepared in the least. I'm still processing what I saw. I mean, the U.S. Capitol being overwhelmed by an anti-democracy protest of a mob of people who were egged on by their ringleader, the President Trump.
Interesting question popped in my head. You were talking about how cellular service had collapsed. For the viewers that are watching, cell towers can only handle so many signals at the same time. You have so many people trying to communicate along with police, along with emergency. And despite all of the conspiracy theories that cell systems were turned off, there's no way cell systems would have been turned off because the police wouldn't have had cell communications, just for starters on that. I saw some interviews with people who say were away from the Capitol, and they were really flummoxed when they were getting questioned, going, do you support the violence going on? And they're like, what violence? And you talked about how you had no access to news. So were there people that legitimately there are like, what are you talking about? Or did it just reach this crescendo and level of chaos and yelling and tear gas that nobody could be in denial of the situation?
Yeah, it was hard to be in denial. Everyone knew exactly what was happening, even without being able, whether they could or not, looking it up on the internet. I mean, it was pretty clear with our own eyes. I don't think there was tear gas. I think it was all pepper spray, maybe some tear gas stuff, but no flashbangs. There were some rubber bullets, I believe. I actually saw one on the ground, I think, at one point that a guy was after to pick up, and but yeah, it was incredibly restrained.
Wow.
So, but no, I think there was no mistaking what was happening. If other people were like me, didn't know that they'd actually gotten inside to that extent. And at one point I was on press scaffolding directly center to where Biden will be sworn in. And I climbed this ladder and I was up there. And I looked down and I saw a door had been opened under the portico where Biden will be. And there were people going in, and I considered going, following, but it was already so backed up. I didn't feel like they were going to get anywhere. And so I just kind of, I mean, in the moment, it's like, I could have done this, I could have done that, but I did what I did.
You were telling me that you witnessed essentially some human wave attacks against the police. Could you talk a little bit about that too?
Yeah, so when you get into the epicenter of the inaugural stage, there's a 5-foot wall, and there were a lot of barriers before that wall. And what they would do is they would lean the barriers up against the wall and use the barriers as a ladder. So what they would do was while they were getting pepper sprayed, those people would fall back, recover, and while they fall back, a new wave of people would push in, and they were just kind of come on, we need to do this and keep up holding the line and pushing in, and they were successful.
Nate, you're talking about persons of color there. You have this picture that you took, which is number 14 in the images that you sent to us. Go ahead and tell me the story behind that image.
I guess I don't know. There's not too much story to that for me. Just kind of she was looking back toward the crowd, kind of doing what I was doing, doing a panorama with her phone. But what makes that image distinctive is she was one of very, very, very few people of color in the crowd who were there to support their president.
As I've experienced, and I know you've experienced, protests of any, whether they're on the left or the right or the middle, if it's a large protest, they can attract some interesting people. And on the photo number 34 you sent to us, there is a interesting individual who is holding 3 different signs with a lot of, it's anti-Semitic at the end of the day, although he just doesn't come out and say it's anti-Semitic. It's as anti-Semitic as you can get. Could you tell us a little bit about Interesting anti-Semitic guy.
Well, once I photographed him, he wasn't on the front lines and he wasn't part of the insurrection, directly part of the insurrection. But, you know, you always get characters and, you know, and everyone, I'd say everyone around me that day was on the fringes, social, you know, politically, but this guy is on a different, you know, and also on the fringes in a maybe crazy, well, different kind of crazy way. And he, once I photographed him, that was one of my last pictures. I'd been out there since 9:30 a.m. I think it was close to 8 p.m. I hadn't used the restroom all day. I'd been on my feet. I've been dealing with threats all day. And so once I took his picture, it's like, I think I'm coming home.
Now, you almost had a disaster happen with some of these photographs. But then I won't necessarily go as far as say that a miracle happened, but there's certainly some plot twists in this story of almost losing all of these photos.
Friday, when I was at Union Station about to catch my train to BWI to fly back to Seattle and sleep in my own bed, I was on the phone with my dad and realized that, oh shoot, my train, it's time for my train to be leaving. Well, I rushed off to board it and realized had missed it and realized I hadn't picked up my backpack, which I'm generally fiercely protective of, and which I had all my eggs in one basket. I had both hard drives and my computer and my camera, and 3 minutes later, and it was gone. And so the Amtrak police were incredibly helpful. And so I was crushed because before DC, I'd been in Georgia photographing the run up to the Georgia runoff elections. Mm-hmm. And so it was a very historic week and one that's real crucial to my book's narrative. And I was devastated. At least I had the 25 medium resolution JPEGs I had mailed Rolling Stone, but I was in a bad, not a complete meltdown, but pretty darn close. And it would have been really bad had not so many in my community come through and pitched in to replace my gear and just send well wishes. And it was really heartening. And people just wanted me to, be able to replace my gear as quickly as possible and get back out there. And well, Sunday, a friend in my Facebook network found the camera listed, and it was unmistakably mine, because mostly when you ever see used Leicas, they're always they're babied and very gently, they look gently used cosmetically. Well, mine is the opposite of that. It has a dented lens hood and it's just been beat to all hell. And so it was my camera. It was 5 miles away. Messaged them. They, played coy. They got spooked. They said, well, we're going to go in another direction. And so I just did a Hail Mary and I said, hey, look, this is my camera, my stuff. And it has very little resale value because it's just banged up and the computer's 7 years old. And I said, I'll pay to get it back. I really want it, mostly because of the images. And because while gear is replaceable, those images absolutely right. Not. And when are you gonna, when am I ever gonna witness another insurrection? Hours went by. I had very little, if hope, if any. I caught my plane, and when I was landing, my friend I was staying with, whose account we'd used to message the seller, said they had responded. They said they'd do the deal. Said they had found me on the internet through my computer. They'd found my identity, and they felt bad. And then it was just very manipulative, where it was like, well, we found your camera and we're good people, and praise be to God that this is going to work out for everyone for if you give us $2,000. And so he spoke with them on the phone. I spoke with them on the phone. Police with, using their phone number, were able to find out who the people were. They strategized with my friend the next day ahead of time. And then he, basically he met up with them and instead of calling me to cash out them the money, he called the police and they detained one of the individuals. And and all my gear was recovered. It was a rough thing to go through because it felt like betraying someone in a very desperate situation. So I did not press charges, and I have my reasons, but that wasn't my intent. My intent was to recover my stuff. And so, because I spoke to them on the phone, and I almost liked them. It's just people in a very rough place, and they saw an opportunity. And so I'm just over the moon that my gear has been recovered, and I will be reuniting with it Saturday when I fly back to DC for round 2.
Nate, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. Thank you for sharing your photos and your thoughts with us. Please be safe.
And I want to add, I don't know if this is relevant. When I go back, I called the Senate press photographers gallery about getting, photographing inside the halls of Congress. But unfortunately, because of COVID, and this totally makes sense, they're not issuing day passes. And so you can't photograph it unless you're already a member. Mm-hmm. And membership takes a month. And then, and I think as far as Joe Biden's inauguration, probably won't be able to photograph that either. It's clamped down, and I think there are very limited passes being issued. And so, but I'll see what I can see.
We've been talking to Nate Gowdy, and this has been a very special episode of Behind the Poll. Nate, thank you so much.
Thank you, David. I look forward to and when things calm down, getting a beer sometime.
I would look forward to that. Absolutely, I appreciate that. We'll definitely take you up on that offer. Thank you. Malcontent News is a team of journalists, activists, and researchers with 3 key missions. A commitment to show an unfiltered view of the before, during, and after of key events, live, as it happens. To defend the First Amendment using our rights of a free press. And to amplify the voices of underrepresented individuals including Black, Indigenous, persons of color, and the LGBTQIA+ community. Our team is committed to seeking equality for all and holding those in power accountable. The easiest way to support Malcontent News is to bookmark our website at malcontentnews.com, like and follow us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, and follow us on Twitter, Periscope, Twitch, Instagram, and in the Google News app. To provide financial support, you can become a patron, make a one-time donation through Venmo, or link your Twitch account to your Amazon Prime account and use your free subscription to subscribe to Malcontent News. Thank you for supporting independent journalism and for being a malcontent.
You fit the profile. You're the malcontent.
Nobody wants to hear the nonsensical ravings of a loudmouth malcontent.
He said malcontent Antifa. Fuck you.
You are the biggest hypocrite on the face of the planet.
I say that you're a terrible reporter. That's what I say.